Pinellas County Sheriff, and we're here this afternoon to announce the arrest of James Quilliams, and it's spelled Quilliams. He's a 41-year-old white male. His date of birth is February 27th, 1973. And before I begin with this, and you'll see why I'm making this statement now as I run through this chronology and the arrest of Quilliams on a first-degree murder charge. It's really very important that citizens in neighborhoods, when they see activity that is suspicious, that they report it as soon as possible to us. It's also important, and I understand how difficult this is, when you see people engaged in domestic arguments, domestic disputes, and arguing. It's important that people report that activity to law enforcement, and it's hard because oftentimes people don't want to become involved in others' business, especially if they're neighbors and especially if there's ongoing domestics. And I understand that, but there's a reason why in Florida and in Florida law and in policies of law enforcement agencies in the state and really around the country, that we do have pro-arrest policies, and we have policies in place to try and protect victims of domestic violence. And as you'll see as I run through this, that there were indicators here, and strong indicators, of what the outcome of this could have been and now was with a domestic violence murder. So let me run through this for you. Again, Quilliams was arrested. The victim in this case is Teresa Sue Compton. She was 49 years old, and her date of birth, May 25th, 1965. This incident occurred at 4761 Stone View Circle in Oldsmar. It has an Oldsmar address, but it's in Eastlake Woodlands, which is unincorporated Pinellas County. Ms. Compton worked for a company in Tampa, and Quilliams was a paramedic who worked for some type of a medical office in Pasco County. As always, this investigation is ongoing, and the information I'm giving to you is the best information that we have available to us right now. Of course, as the investigation moves forward, we'll know more and have more information available. So I'm giving you the best and most current information we have at the moment. Quilliams and Compton shared this residence on Stoneview Circle in Oldsmar together as a couple, although they were not married, since March of 2013. The home was owned by Ms. Compton alone. The only criminal history that we know of for Quilliams is a prior disorderly conduct charge in the state of Tennessee. On December 27th, 2013, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the deputies responded to a domestic argument at the residence on Stoneview Circle. And we were called by Ms. Compton's adult daughter, Lindsay Carson, who was visiting from Tennessee. There had been a domestic between Quilliams and Ms. Compton because Compton had found text messages in Quilliams' phone indicating that he was communicating with his ex-wife, who was from Tennessee, and was contemplating getting back together with his ex-wife. As a result of that domestic, Ms. Compton had taken Quilliams' belongings, put them on the front porch of the residence, and told him to get out. So that would have happened sometime on December 26th, because again, we were called there at 1 a.m. on December 27th. So apparently Quilliams, after his stuff was put on the porch, left the residence and then returned. And when he returned, sometime just prior to 1 a.m. on the 27th, is that he was banging on the front door, he was kicking the door, he had gone around to the rear sliders on the back porch and was kicking the door and trying to get into the residence. Miss Compton's daughter saw as he was banging on the door trying to get in that he had a knife in his hand, and obviously very concerned about that, and called and sheriff's deputies responded out there. What we learned at that point was that it's sometime prior to that time of 1 a.m. on December 27th, is that Quilliams had been back in the residence, and he had taken a knife, and he had repeatedly stabbed the mattress in the master bedroom of the residence. And apparently after stabbing the mattress several times, and this was in the master bedroom and the bed that he shared with the victim, Ms. Compton, he had left and then returned again, and that's when we were called. The deputies tried to find Quilliams. We were unsuccessful in doing that. And based on the investigation at that time, and even it's bad, it sounds bad, and he stabbed the mattress and he was outside. Based on the investigation and the conduct that occurred at that time, and they did try and find him unsuccessfully, is that there were no criminal charges as a result of that. There was no criminal violation determined because of the investigation and all the factors. So after not being able to find him, at some point after December 27th, is Miss Compton allowed Quilliams to move back in to the residence. So he moves back in, and the next thing that we know is this past Sunday, January 12th, is between 8 and 8:30 p.m. There's a neighbor that saw Quilliams sitting in his vehicle, which is a black Nissan Xterra, in the driveway, facing outward, as the neighbor went to walk his dog. And the neighbor couldn't be more specific, but he knows him and has seen him around the neighborhood. They've lived there for the last, just short of a year, and described Quilliams as looking, quote, weird. And that's the only thing he could really describe it as. It was just the nature of his appearance. The neighbor walked his dog, came back about 20 minutes later, and now the vehicle was flipped around in the driveway and backed in tight against the garage. Nothing that the neighbor saw at that point caused him to call the sheriff's office. Between 11 p.m. on Sunday night the 12th and midnight, neighbors heard arguing, yelling, and a domestic argument occurring at the Quilliams Compton residence. And this is not the first time they've heard that. Apparently they've heard it several times, and several neighbors have heard it. And there were ongoing domestic arguments and yelling between Quilliams and Compton. And according to the neighbors, quote, this was nothing new and had been going on for a period of time. The next thing that we know that happened was at 4:21 a.m. on the 13th, which would have been Monday morning, is Quilliams booked a flight on Allegiant Air from the St. Petersburg Clearwater Airport to Knoxville, Tennessee, with a flight due to leave at 5 p.m. on Monday. At 6 o'clock a.m., the same neighbor who had been walking his dog the night before, who saw Quilliams in the driveway, again saw Quilliams in the driveway as he took his dog out for a morning walk. And stated again, he looked weird, and the car was in the driveway, and Quilliams was in the driveway of the residence. At 8 a.m. on Monday morning, a different neighbor saw Quilliams and heard glass breaking and saw him putting something in a trash bag. At 10 a.m. on Monday morning, yet another neighbor saw Quilliams' vehicle at the residence but didn't see him. We know on Monday afternoon at 3:35, Quilliams checked his luggage for that Allegiant Air flight at the St. Petersburg Clearwater International Airport. So he's at the airport about 3:35 on Monday afternoon. At 4:50 p.m. on Monday afternoon, a neighbor, yet another neighbor, saw blood in the driveway of the residence and called the sheriff's office because that neighbor recognized that with blood in the driveway, something needed to be investigated. So deputies arrived at the residence right around 4:50 p.m. on Monday afternoon and entered the residence. And when they entered the residence, they found a very, very bloody living area, what we'll characterize as a very bloody crime scene. They searched the residence, and unfortunately and very sadly found Miss Compton face down in the garage, covered with a cloth-type material, and she was deceased and had been stabbed many times. Quilliams' flight, which was due to leave at 5 p.m., which was right at the time that we were called, had been delayed and didn't actually leave the St. Pete Clearwater Airport until about 7:20 p.m. Monday evening. It arrived in Knoxville at about 8:50 p.m. And we know through the investigation that Quilliams was picked up in Knoxville and taken by a friend to a motel in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is about 100 miles east of Knoxville. Through various surveillance techniques that we have, We know that Quilliams' phone was used and in that Pigeon Forge, Tennessee area at about 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday evening. Our detectives were communicating with law enforcement officers in Tennessee that night at about 5 a.m. on Wednesday morning, January 15th, so this would have been yesterday morning. The Pigeon Forge Police Department arrested Christy Renee Williams, who's the ex-wife of Brian Quilliams. So this is the ex-wife who was in Tennessee that they were having the text messages and the argument about. So when the Pigeon Forge police arrested Christy Quilliams, they asked her if she wanted her husband to come pick up her car, and she said no. He's running from the police because he just killed a woman in Florida. So upon further interviewing Christy Quilliams, she said that when she was arrested by the police department on the DUI charge, she was returning home from dropping Brian Quilliams off at the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and that he was running from the police and that she had dropped him off in the national park. Pinellas County Sheriff's Office detectives coordinated with the Sevier County, Tennessee Sheriff's Office and learned that Quilliams had access to a cabin in the 3100 block of Valley Home Way in Wears, W-E-A-R-S, Wears Valley, Tennessee. Late last night, the Sevier County Sheriff's Office and the United States Marshal Service found Quilliams at that cabin and arrested him on the first-degree murder warrant. Pinellas County Sheriff's Office detectives are presently in Tennessee, and the investigation is ongoing. We did find Quilliams' vehicle in a parking lot at the St. Pete Clearwater Airport. There's blood on the exterior of the vehicle. The vehicle is being processed. We have a search warrant for the vehicle. We do know from statements that Quilliams made to his ex-wife that he had unsuccessfully tried to load the victim, Ms. Compton, in the vehicle. Was unable to do so, and that's why he left her in the garage. The murder weapon, which we found on a bed in the residence, is this sword that you see right here in the photograph. This is the actual sword that we found. There's a photograph of it, and we believe that is the murder weapon. We're still waiting on some additional testing, but I'm confident that that is the murder weapon. Ms. Compton was stabbed between 5 and 10 times. There were also numerous chopping wounds to her extremities and various parts of her body in addition to the stab wounds. One of the stab wounds, you can see by the sword how long it is. One of the stab wounds was a through and through, top to bottom stab wound that went in one side here, went all the way through her chest, and came out down here on the other side. So he butchered her pretty good, and it was a very, very bloody crime scene. Again, with a lot of defensive wounds. It was obviously a very violent argument, a very violent struggle, and she was putting up her hands to defend herself, and that's probably where some of the chopping wounds came from. And you know, from the looks of it, with the sword and the through and through of her chest from here to here, you know, he butchered her is what he did, and it was a very, again, very bloody scene. So again, the investigation is ongoing, but you can see, I think, and I hope from running through this scenario, why I made the comments I did a few minutes ago, is that there were things that occurred here over a period of time, and there was ongoing arguments, ongoing domestics, ongoing yelling and screaming, and we had not been called by anybody, neither Ms. Compton or Quilliams, other than that one incident on the 27th when she called us, or her daughter called us. But neighbors heard things, and as hard as it is, and as difficult as it is, when you see things that are going on in your neighborhood and people are having those domestics and yelling and screaming, call us so that we can come out, we can assess the situation, and perhaps take some action early on that would avoid a tragic consequence such as this.